Hello, and welcome to the first of hopefully many Monster Monday videos for the Ready to Die channel. Since the rules for making monsters in Pathfinder Second Edition came out, I've been building a bevy of brutal beasts. Normally I post these monsters over on a blog, and while they're still there, I wanted to expand the number of ways that I present them. So, going forward, every Monday, I aim to bring you a new Pathfinder Second Edition monster and dive into the design process for that creature. Today, we are discussing the Odibatorasu, a daunting desert dweller originating from Monster Hunter Forward Frontier. Classified as a flying wyvern and commonly grouped along the likes of Eucanlos and Acantor, he serves as the sand god to their white god and black god respectively. Why they didn't go with red god to better fit the color theme, I have no idea, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. This relation does provide us with a solid basis for determining the level of Odibatorasu. Based on other monsters I built, including Eucanlos itself, I settled on level 17. With the level of Odibatorasu determined, the next step came in figuring out the rest of his numbers. Determining ability scores can be a bit arbitrary in 2nd edition, but it does provide a useful frame of reference for the creature. The Odibatorasu has a high strength and con, but is essentially just a giant animal, so it's going to have that lower intelligence and isn't very agile. I wanted the Odibatorasu to be this lumbering beast, so oversized and powerful that it doesn't even bother to take much notice of its surroundings, leading to my choice of a lower perception score. Defensively, the Odibatorasu is a sturdy monster, using a high value for its fortitude save, a more moderate bonus for its will, but a low and bordering on terrible reflex save, given that it is essentially a giant tortoise. Now, I'm a big fan of terrapins, but you have to admit, they aren't the most nimble of creatures. The Odibatorasu uses a moderate AC and an HP range between moderate and high. This might seem a bit much given its resistance to physical damage, but it also has a heavy weakness to electricity damage for the players to exploit. I ran 2 test encounters for the Odibatorasu, but the first was overall disappointing. The second, which you may see clips from within this video, ran for 5 rounds, which seems about right for an easy encounter against a level 17 creature. I want to mention that the decision to include a resistance to physical damage comes from attacks below certain sharpness bouncing off of the creature in Monster Hunter, a staple feature that I've discussed among others and decided I best liken to represent through resistance rather than a higher AC. I tried to base the strikes of the Odibatorasu off of the same sort that he uses in-game, while keeping them all distinct and worth using in different situations. But in my aim to capture the wide range of his abilities, you might find yourself without many chances to slip in these attacks. It uses a moderate attack bonus for all of its attacks except its foot, which gets a high attack bonus but has the lowest damage, tied with its sand cannon but lacking any of the handy aspects of it, such as range and the fatal trait. To be completely honest, I mainly included a foot strike because I knew I wanted to include a trample ability. Now, we can finally get into the fun part, discussing our towering terrapin's special abilities. Among its more creative abilities, there are also some more common powers. It can burrow and naturally has tremor sense to allow it to navigate while underground. It is enormous, similar to the moose spore, mostly because it felt appropriate to acknowledge the immensity of the Odibatorasu in Monster Hunter, where many creatures are baseline huge. For its slightly more unique abilities, I want to start with discussing its eroding breath. This is based on the simple beam of sand that the Odibatorasu launches from its maw, represented by a line rather than a cone, since that is achieved by the Odibatorasu making sweeping motions with it. In an effort to distinguish this ability a bit, and because I like the rapid stream of sand stripping away flesh, this power also features a persistent bleed effect. Given that the levels it is likely to be faced at, most classes that would get evasion have it, I aim to make this ability a little more applicable by having this bleed happen if a creature takes any damage from it at all. The line effect is also wider to reflect the sheer size of the monster. Similar in function to its eroding breath is the Odibatorasu's sand salvo, which I tried to make multifunctional. It represents both the immense sphere of sand it launches as well as the barrage it fires around itself from the smaller ports in its shell. Its sand cannon strike represents a sort of in-between of these area abilities that it can regularly fire. Lacking the bleed associated with eroding breath, this ability gets slightly higher damage, but the Mac Daddy of the Odibatorasu's damaging abilities is its reverberating eruption. This is based off of the short range but extremely high damage bursts that the Odibatarasu performs that I have seen one-shot hunters. As such, it has higher damage than normal and even knocks people prone, but has a higher cooldown die. Speaking of knocking people prone, the Odibatarasu has a good range of abilities to debilitate foes. From its Thunder Stomp tripping people up to its Mighty Roar stunning them, it seeks to slow down and limit foes while setting them up for its hard-hitting area attacks. In particular, its Mighty Roar is based off of the classic roar of Monhun monsters, which is usually an ability I skip unless it's tied more deeply to the creature than others. It feels like it is for the Odibatarasu, especially where it seems to roar to stun hunters before unleashing its one-shot attack to catch them in it. Losing actions is obnoxious, so I went with a lower DC, but also a lower cooldown since it doesn't deal any damage. Its Thunder Stomp doesn't have any cooldown to worry about, and instead just has the Flourish trait since it is an area trip effectively without the damaging effects of a crit success on a trip. When the Odibatarasu wants to keep somebody in place, it can use Sunken Earth. This ability is based off of the strange power that the Odibatarasu has to create pillars of sand that entrap people before collapsing them and partially burying them in the earth. I considered using Immobilize for this effect, but it actually imprisons characters, negating their ability to fight, and so I went for Grabbed with Restrained on a critical failure. The Grab condition is based more on the sand pillars, whereas the Restrained represents actually being trapped in the ground. Finally, the Odibatarasu has a Sandstorm ability as a defensive power, which, even if it doesn't blind players, will conceal our titanic tortoise. This ties into its Sand Vision, which I held off of discussing until now, and is a pretty standard sort of ability, and one included because the Odibatarasu will hide itself in sand and then fire at hunters from its cover. I've also included a weapon based off of the Odibatarasu, the Sandstorm Cannon. Inspired by the gunner armor getting a bit more to it, as well as the monster's own ballistic talents, I decided to lean towards a firearm, creating a weapon that can draw on the earth around it to unleash in a violent sandstorm, mimicking the monster's own abilities. And that covers the Odibatarasu. This monster works best as a massive threat for a party, possibly as a guardian for an ancient ruin, but could also have a tribe of worshippers that the so-called Sand God has developed a kinship with. Its wide array of area attacks will force a party to scatter, whereas crowd control abilities can lock victims down for its deadlier attacks. You can check out the Monster Monday blog or Twitter for the stat blocks, or hop on the Discord to join the monster making and general tabletop discussions. These posts also include a Pathfinder First Edition version of the monster, along with a D&D 5e conversion. You can also find other monsters I built, as well as character builds in those links. Thanks for watching, and have a monstrous Monday.